I'm Sandy Potter.
I'm Michael L., and welcome to Ageless Living.
When the pandemic began, many of us sought out new ways to stay connected and foster interpersonal relationships.
And for one Madison teenager, that meant getting involved in a pen pal program where she was paired up with a local senior.
And what they found has led to a very special intergenerational friendship and an artistic collaboration. I was delighted to speak with Katie Biner and Steve Pinn about their experience. Let's take a look at our virtual discussion. Hello, Katie and Steve. Thank you so much for joining us on Ageless Living.
Hi, nice to be here.
Thank you for having us.
It's wonderful to have you both. We love your story, and we're so very grateful to have you here to tell it in person. So let's start at the beginning. Take us back to the beginning of the pandemic and why you decided to get involved in this unique pen pal program.
Katie, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, absolutely. So we got out of school around March 13th, was right around where we ended up at home. And one of the first things my mom said to me at the time was there are going to be the people that take advantage of this time, and there are going to be the people that just need to, take a step back, be with family, and just adjust and cope with what is happening. And I took some time to do that. And then I thought, what can I do in this time at home? What are some opportunities in my community to both improve the community and also better myself as a person? And a girls group that I'm in at school, our advisor, Melissa Boletto, she had sent something out about a pen pal program at the senior center. So I did what I always do when I see opportunities like that. I threw my hand in the air and I thought, this is going to be an awesome opportunity. And in a time where we couldn't really control anything else, I thought at least I could try to bring joy to somebody that might be feeling lonely during the time. And I thought that maybe I'd make more of a difference that way. I didn't know that I actually was just as lonely and needed somebody to talk to as well, and that we would teach each other a lot, and basically like an equal amount, and become friends like this. So
For me, it's very similar to what Katie is saying. I'm a retired principal and, have always really loved young people and, have been really missing that contact with young people. But when I saw that opportunity, my initial thinking was, this is going to be really hard for young people. They're out of school, they're isolated. It's an opportunity for me to reach out and maybe, support some young people during this difficult time. And very much like Katie, I approached it from the standpoint of, this would be a good fit for me. I love talking with young people. It wasn't very long into it that I realized how lonely and isolated I was. And, I started it by thinking, I'm going to do something nice for a young person. But, as I told Katie and others, I benefited from it, I think, far more than what I gave to it. And I didn't fully realize how much I needed that contact and that relationship. So.
That's really beautiful. And it really must have been fate that the two of you were paired together in this program. And as you say, you really learn that you have so much in common and bridge that generational gap. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. Let me, speak to that. I began our correspondence, which was, was all email, although I did do a handwritten letter to her because I wanted her to see what letters really used to look like. But, I started that thinking that, I needed to be careful, that, this is a young person, I have strong views on most everything, and politically and otherwise. And so I started out very cautiously, not really advancing those ideas. Before very long, it became clear that, we had similar curiosities. There are things we wondered about. There's things we explored. There were big questions that we looked at, that it became clear that we were more aligned that way. There's a point I really want to get across in terms of this relationship and what it meant for me, and continues to mean for me. I've been active my whole life on a variety of things. And, during the pandemic, both as a result of the pandemic and isolation, I began looking at a lot of things I've worked hard on my whole life that seemed to be dissolving. Things around women's issues in particular. And, I was getting distressed about that. It's like all the work we've done and people in my generation have done, I saw unraveling. And in talking to Katie, ultimately what she gave me was hope, because she was, picking up that standard and making a commitment to many of those same values that she was going to work and carry forward. Ultimately, and we'll talk about that later, it led to our joint project. But, part of what I took from this relationship is, okay, there are young people that are taking up these issues and bringing their own energy to it. And that meant an awful lot to me.
Yeah, so I think at the beginning, it was very much not the superficial hobbies, but it was a bit like, what do we have in common? Like I mentioned, I like to bake, and Steve said he has really good bread recipes and has been making bread his whole life. And it started sort of with those things. And then honestly, during the pandemic and just 2020 in general, our country, and continues to be, but at the time it was so polarized politically that it was just something that I'd never really brought up unless somebody else brought it up first. And not for a lack of any strong opinions on my side either. I've debated my whole life, and I've always been involved in politics and local elections and everything. And something I love to talk about, I loved engaging in discourse about that, but I didn't want to push it, especially during a time like that. And it was funny, I ended up running into Steve at a couple things that made it clear that I should have brought it up in the beginning because we very much aligned. So I ran into him at Madison's first Pride event. I was working as a volunteer. And we also ran into each other at like a Democratic town mixer, which is funny because I don't think many teenagers would have been there, but I was always at those. And then it just became clear that, I was like most teenagers before this pandemic. I think that I always appreciated that the older generation and my grandparents had life experiences to share with me, and that I should pay attention to them. But that disconnect between generations, it got in the way sometimes. I'm not perfect, and sometimes I was the teenager that I was like, bye Pop, I gotta go because I'm going to meet my friends, and I can't listen to any more stories about the Korean War. But it just became clear that like 50 years, whatever it is, didn't compare at all to how much that we had in common and what we were passionate about. And during a time when there was so much uncertainty, it also brought me a lot of hope that there are other really good people out there that care about changing the things that I care about changing. So it was definitely a form of hope in that way. Just to know that there's a guy out there that's a feminist, and a really good one. That's unfortunately not something I see all the time. My grandfather being one of those people, my mom tells a story about in med school how one of her professors asked when all the parents were visiting if everybody that was a feminist in the room would raise their hands, and he was the only man in the entire room that raised his hand. And I always think about that and think about how can I find those people so that we can work together on these issues. So that was definitely something I learned really early on about Steve and our shared interests.
Just great. And Steve, you were starting to talk about over time, your friendship led to an artistic collaboration that culminated in an art exhibit. Tell us about your Adopted Sisters project.
Okay. You know, part of the conversation that Katie and I had was, you know, and we talked about philosophy, we talked about a variety of things, but, you know, part of the message was my belief and her belief that who we become needs to be a deliberate process. You don't leave that to just chance, you know, which led to a deeper conversation of so how do you do that? And, you know, I've counseled, you know, I was a high school principal for many years. You know, I've talked to young people and I said, you know, part of how you do that is you look at the people around you and you look out into the world and you look at the people that you admire and you think about what are the qualities that they have that you want to emulate, you know, and that's a deliberate process. So, you know, prior to meeting Katie, I had begun a series of portraits of women that I think were major change agents in the world for a variety of reasons. I wanted to draw attention to, you know, particularly during this time, I looked out and I said, who are the people that are really making a difference? Nationally, internationally, who are the leaders that are holding forth values that are human-centered and people-centered? And, you know, and in every case, they were women, you know. So, you know, I wanted to be able to make that statement. So as our relationship evolved, you know, she started talking about women that had impact on her life, that she emulates, that she thinks were courageous people. And so that idea of how do we spread this message to other young people and to in the public in general, that these qualities that these people have are important to think about, they're important to hold on to, and they're important to emulate. So, you know, from that discussion in Katie's group, and she can speak to that, they got behind that idea of selecting a particular hero, selecting an idea or a quote that that person really represented, and saying, I'm adopting this idea. I'm adopting this quote to carry with me through my life as a guiding light to the person I want to be. So, I mean, that's where it went, and Katie can speak more because, you know, I mean, we played around with the idea, but that young women's group jumped all over it. So, I mean, she can speak to it.
Yeah, so I run a bunch of different groups at my high school that relate to female empowerment in general. So I'm run Girls United, and She's the First, as well as Gains, which is just women's advancements in the STEM field. And I mean, like I said, I saw quarantine as a time where it was going to be more difficult to make change because, you know, we couldn't be sitting together in rooms and talking. We couldn't be out doing bake sales and things like that. So this was definitely an awesome way to just say, like, who can we learn from that's already paved the way? And that's been a common theme in my life. I mean, my mom raised me as, like, my 10th birthday, she was like, "This is me" by Katharine Hepburn, read Gloria Steinem's books. And she had always given me those books. And I would read through all of them. And then I was the kid that I would dress up as Gloria Steinem for Halloween. And all my friends were like, "Who is that?" And, you know, I was always like that. And I think in situations when I didn't know what to do, I would think, you know, what would Katharine Hepburn do? What would Gloria Steinem do? What would Malala do? And it extended to my mom too. My mom's like my best friend, and she is just a tangible female role model that I've always had of, like, listen, you can do anything in the world that you want to do. And then as soon as Steve said something about, like, let's learn from these past women and adopt them as our sisters, I thought, well, that's what I've always wanted to do. I've wanted to teach younger girls and just inspire girls around me to have those role models that in times where you don't know what to do, you can think about what they would do. So I talked to my group, Girls United, and I said, like, if anybody wants an opportunity right now to participate in another activity in this group and learn a little bit and make really cool connections, jump on with me. And we basically, we each picked a woman. So mine was Emma Gonzalez. And we picked a quote that was really important to us that they had said. And then we just had a bunch of meetings where we sat down and talked about what can we learn? What characteristics do we want to embody? How can we build off of the momentum that they've started? And it was really cool. It started to be something that was joining our internal monologues in our lives. And then, yeah, we ended up doing a documentary that sort of put everything together. And we each talked a little bit about the most important things about our role model.
My adopted sister is Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and she once said, "Fight for the things that you care about, but do it in a way that will lead others to join you." And this quote has always resonated with me ever since I first heard it. RBG has a legacy that we all need to uphold, and I was completely heartbroken when I heard that she passed away. But I know that she proved to everybody that you can still be the minority and overcome adversity, and that's something that I'll carry with me for the rest of my life.
The whole project, at least for me, just perfectly encapsulated the fact that I have always strived to be like my role models. And I've always, thought in my mind, what would my mom do here? What would Gloria do here? But now I've started to think, what would Steve do here? So as well, he is somebody that has joined my list of role models that I'm always taking advice from and just thinking, how can I be more like them? So it was cool that it was just a big documentary of all my role models. It's a really cool experience.
That is so touching. And you even had your collaboration come together in this exhibit at a local art gallery with the documentary and Steve's beautiful paintings. So that must have been a special moment for the two of you.
It was an important evening, and people are saying, well, it's an opportunity to sell your paintings. I didn't do the paintings to sell them. I did them because I had something to say. And, we had about 65 people come to that show and watch the video, and the young women were there. And, it was a very successful evening from my perspective. Not from the traditional art gallery showing perspective, but from really taking art and saying, art has such power to be able to communicate and connect with important things. And, for me, 70 years old, surrounded by these young women who were enthusiastic about the message they're trying. It was definitely one of the great evenings of my life. I loved it. So.
And I think also I didn't appreciate art fully, at least that type of art, until I met Steve. I've been a dancer my whole life. So in that way, that's sort of how I express myself. I've done it in my writing too. I think if you handed me a piece of paper and said, draw something, you would have no idea what it was. I've never been an artist in that way, but just talking to Steve about what he wanted to represent in his paintings and talking about how he could display the attributes of these women in his art it was insane to me. I'd never thought about art in that way. And I think that night for me was about appreciating his talent and also appreciating that we were able to put our strong suits together. And just sort of combine two aspects of our life and, like he said, really say something that I hope stayed with people from that night. I know that it stayed with all my girls and it will always stay with me. So
just incredible. And I know, Steve, among these courageous women that you painted, you also painted Katie.
Every one of these figures that I painted started out by making individual choices that they were going to make a difference, okay? And that's what makes them courageous. It isn't, we certainly can look at the accumulation of all of their accomplishments, but, that wasn't the essence of it. I wanted Katie in among them, and I think it's an absolute fair comparison. Why? You know, I mean, you look at it and you go, well, it's, you know, that's fate that brought you together. And I go, well, you know, maybe to some extent. But, you know, when you really look at it, you go, of all the young people and of all the seniors, okay, I mean, the reason we came together is we're both committed to trying to make a difference in the space and the time we have. That's the courageous part, you know, and that's what she does. I mean, she literally, I mean, very literally does something every single day. You know, some small thing, whatever, but it is her commitment that I am going to make a difference and I'm going to bring my energy to it. So, you know, I very much wanted her painting there, and it wasn't an aside, you know, here are all these famous women and here's Katie. I'm going, there is no difference here. It's the same dynamic.
Well, the paintings are absolutely beautiful, and the collaboration between the two of you is even more special. I really want to truly thank you so much for sharing your story with us today. You are very inspiring, and we wish you all the best in all of your future endeavors.
Thank you
Thank you so much.
Stay well.
Right. Bye now.
Bye.
And now, let's take a look at what's happening around Masonicare. Did you know that Masonicare manages a vibrant community in Southwick, Massachusetts called Southwick Village? We're proud to bring our legacy experience and ageless commitment to caring to this unique community. Be sure to like Southwick Village on Facebook and visit southwickvillage.com to keep up with all the exciting updates. The 2021 Walks to End Alzheimer's are coming up soon, which helps raise awareness and funds to find a cure for Alzheimer's. This year, you can participate at the in-person group walks or by simply walking in your own neighborhood. Both our Masonicare Memory Keepers team and Masonicare at Mystic team are open to everyone, and no fundraising is required. Visit Masonicare's Facebook page to join a team or to make a contribution.
Thank you so much for joining us for another edition of Ageless Living.
We look forward to bringing you more stories about living well as we take this journey together.
And until next time, stay well and remember, be ageless. Bye.